Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to Operation Freedom Briefings. The goal of these briefings in my weekly radio show, Operation Freedom, which airs from the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, out of the Freedom Bunker at Wham Talk 1600 every Sunday from 2 to 5 Eastern. Our goals with the show and this platform and the website, davejanda.com, is to provide you information, guests, and analysis that you're not going to get from the bought-off, lamestream, fake media. For the radio show, it's free every Sunday, 2 to 5 Eastern. It's live. You can join us for free, as I said. Go to davejanda.com, hit the Listen Live button, takes you to Wham Talk 1600 streaming service, hit the play button, and you're with us. This past week, we had listeners in all 50 states of the United States, or I guess in Obama's terms, 57 states, wherever they are, and over 60 countries, 60 countries worldwide, folks listened to the show. I believe we have grown that show, this YouTube channel, and the website, davejanda.com, because of the outstanding guests and analysis that we bring forward. You can join us on this YouTube channel for the radio show and also become a subscriber at davejanda.com. 30 cents a day, $9 a month. I believe the biggest bang for the buck in all the internet, with the extra shows and extra content and all the archives to the radio shows and our videos and the like. Hope you'll become part of our Freedom family. The topic of today's presentation is the deep state's information operation is melting. Oh, it's melting. They don't want you to believe that. They want you to think that mass chaos is occurring, that the country's falling apart. It's all Donald Trump and his administration's fault, and we need a change. This is a perception operation, and it's in overdrive. I mean, the deep state sees their reign of terror ending. And they're petrified, and they're desperate, and they will do anything and everything to keep their reign of terror in place. Hence, the escalation of the information warfare that we've all been experiencing at the hands of the bought-off, lamestream, fake media, which is a tentacle of the deep state, and by the puppets of the deep state who are crawling out of the woodwork to tell you that all is not well. And there are problems with the president and his administration, and we need a change. We did a surgical dissection this past weekend of the generals and admirals that have shown us that they are aligned with the deep state. Mattis, Kelly, Mullen, Allen, Colin Powell, admirals, McRaven, and Mullen. But also General Milley, the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, when he came out recently and said, I shouldn't have walked across Lafayette Park on June 1st when the president walked out of the White House and brought us across Lafayette Park. But the president, that was a very symbolic move. Lafayette Park, across the street from the White House, had been vandalized, torched, by the peaceful protesters. No, not peaceful protesters. Arsonists, looters, rioters, criminals, deep state operatives. But it wasn't just the park that they torched. They torched a church. St. John's Episcopal Church, the Church of the Presidents, a historical landmark. And President Trump, by walking out of the White House, walking across the battlefield of Lafayette Park and reclaiming it from the terrorists, and then standing in front of that church, he made a statement that as president, he was upholding the oath he took to the Constitution, defending every American's right to practice their religion. It's an inherent part of the Constitution. That's what he did. General Milley, as a member of the military, also gave an oath to the Constitution. And then all of a sudden, 10 days later, he starts speaking about, well, this is a This is a problem that I walked across Lafayette Park with the president. No, it wasn't. He said, well, it was a political situation. No, it was a constitutional act. What was political was General Milley's response. And I believe that response, which came 10 days later, was a result of pressure that he received from deep state operatives. Period. You know, we've witnessed the deep state going into desperation mode. People want you to think that they're in control and that they're the all-powerful entity. That's part of the information warfare. They want you to believe, to suppress you, to demoralize you. No. They're panicked. They're desperate. These acts you're seeing are not out of power, but desperation. It started with the whole Russian collusion hoax in trying to remove President Trump. That didn't work. So then they tried the fake Ukrainian hoax to remove him from power. That didn't work. And then they went through the whole goat rodeo of an impeachment hoax. And that didn't work. So then they decided to cause civil unrest and economic chaos. And through their technocratic little buddy, China, they unleashed the freedom stripping virus on the world, directed at the United States. The goal of that was to create such economic chaos and social chaos that President Trump would be pushed out of office. That didn't work. So now they needed a spark. And the guy in Minneapolis, Chauvin, gave him the spark. Now, one of the hallmarks of our country, which separates us from countries such as China, is the right, the opportunity, and the benefit of peaceful protesting. It's what I do every time I do a video on this channel, every time I do a radio show, every time I add subscription content to davejanda.com. But in China, that some people embraced and said, oh, they're so wonderful. Joe Biden, Bill Gates, just to name a few. Oh, China, oh, they're so, really? June 4th, 1989, peaceful protest. Tiananmen Square. Yeah. That's how technocrats that are owned and operated by the deep state handle peaceful protests. Yeah. They squash them when it's directed against them. But when deep state operatives want to target the freedom movement, they morph peaceful protests into criminal acts, rioting, looting, arson, robbery, assault, murder. And that's exactly what they did. They got their spark in Minneapolis, and they tried to light fires in every urban center, and actually outside of urban centers throughout our country. Joe Biden recently said that George Floyd is the biggest civil rights leader in our country's history. Joe, back to the basement, buddy. Not so much. In my lifetime, the most profound civil rights leader was Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, the deep state doesn't want you to know this, addressed peaceful protests, of course, and also addressed about rioting and looting. Have you heard this? Have you heard what I'm about to play for you on Fox even? No. Let's see if we can play this for you. Here we go. Martin Luther King.
Let me say, as I've always said, and I will always continue to say, that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. I'm still convinced that non-violence is the most potent weapon available to oppress people in their struggle for freedom and justice. I feel that violence will only create more social problems than they will solve. That in a real sense it is impractical for the Negro to even think of mounting a violent revolution in the United States.
Martin Luther King. The deep state doesn't want you to know that or hear that. He denounced rioting and looting. He promoted peaceful protests. Which takes us to Black Lives Matter. Anyone who starts to look at Black Lives Matter and dissects that organization, anyone who speaks out and says, wait a minute, I have some questions and some concerns about this organization, they're deemed a racist. Those of us that look into organizations, whether it's Black Lives Matter or you name the organization across the board, we're not being racist. We're just doing our due diligence. We're realists. We're not racist. You see, they throw that card out there to dissuade people from looking behind the curtain. And not just Black Lives Matter, not just Antifa, but any organization. Remember, Black Lives Matter reportedly was created to direct all of its attention against police brutality. Okay. But if that's the case, why did this occur this past week on CNN, no less? June 19th. Black Lives Matter co-founder admits, quote, our goal is to get Trump out, end quote. Wait. I thought the whole focus of Black Lives Matter was to look at police brutality issues across the country, because we've outlined those statistics before in several videos ago. If you haven't seen those videos, you need to. Because I did a deep dissection on the actual data and the facts as it relates to police interactions with whites, with blacks, with Hispanics. The deep state didn't want you to know that. That video was suppressed. Not because it was inaccurate, because it was completely accurate. This is from Zero Hedge. While massive protests continue to rage across the country and beyond in the name of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter co-founder Patrisse Cullors admitted during a June 19th, 2020 interview with CNN that, quote, our goal is to get Trump out. Cullors, now listen, who described Black Lives Matter organizers in 2015 as, quote, trained Marxists, end quote. Patrisse Cullors, who admitted that an entire organization was about training Marxists. Here's what she said at CNN. Trump, again, tell me where we get into the police brutality issue here. Trump not only needs not to be in office in November, but he should resign now. Trump needs to be out of office. He is not fit for office. And so what we are going to push for is to move to get Trump out. Okay. She went on. Well, we're also going to continue to push and pressure Vice President Joe Biden around his policies and relationship to policing and criminalization. That's going to be important, but our goal is to get Trump out. There's a video up that I've spoken about before by a former member of Black Lives Matter. He was an organizer in Ferguson, Missouri, several years ago. His name is Shazil Sunz, S-U-N-Z. Search engine him. He put out a video a couple weeks ago where he spoke about Black Lives Matter and how the organization was taken over by subversives that really weren't looking out for the welfare of the blacks in the black community and identifying problems and issues, but was in fact becoming an anarchist organization that was bent on destruction of the country and of everybody's freedoms and liberties. Shazil Sunz, S-U-N-Z. This narrative of taking over peaceful protests, and people, everyone had the right and opportunity to protest the senseless and preventable death of George Floyd. And the rule of law has been implemented against the perpetrators of what happened to him. And a trial is forthcoming. And folks wanted to protest, that's fine, but that protest movement, as we've outlined many times before on this platform, was hijacked. And the purpose of hijacking was to induce fear into the masses, put pressure on Trump to try to get him removed, and to ensure a victory for their puppet Joe Biden in November, or whoever else is there. But it's falling apart. It's falling apart at the seams. Just look at what's happened to Seattle. The protests have now moved into Seattle, and as you know, 6 square blocks were commandeered by the anarchists, by the Black Lives Matter folks, from Antifa, from the terrorists. By the way, these organizations are funded by deep state operatives. And there is a link to Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea.